Welcome to Section 6, Strategy and Planning. Click Begin to get started. Materials management planning is a common process in all built environment projects. It is used by organizations to arrange, coordinate, and control material components during a project's execution. Materials management is a process that occurs through most of the project lifecycle, pictured here, from the business planning through the construction stages. During this process, planners define what goods and services they will need to buy and how much they will cost. To do this in a standardized, consistent, and effective way during the planning process, it is important to have a materials management strategy. In this section, you will learn how to define a project strategy and plan a materials management process. Make engineering a critical element of the planning process. Achieve economies of scale in the procurement and supply chain processes. Assess the impact of critical path and lead times. Understand methods for quantity planning, budgeting, and estimation. Plan and trace the cash flows of materials and debt servicing costs. And identify and evaluate risks in the materials management process. Let's get started. Click Next. Before any project begins, it is important to define its strategy as part of the business planning stage. The project strategy involves aligning the project to the organization's strategy and can be based on the company's culture or local practices, or it can be defined uniquely for a particular project. This section provides an overview of the material manager's core responsibilities, the purpose, importance, and the components of the project strategy. Let's begin with a brief overview of the materials manager's core responsibilities, which include negotiating supplier contracts, expanding the supplier network, reducing transport costs, and optimizing the cost-to-quality ratio. Organizations must align their processes and procedures to achieve consistency in project execution. Common challenges to project execution include legacy practices, unofficial agreements, and poorly defined local and business practices. Creating and following a formal project strategy enables the organization to anticipate and overcome these and other challenges. Because the materials manager plays such a vital role in the process, this person should be involved in formulating the strategy early and often. The project strategy provides the framework for a successful project by articulating the required standards and policies. These should be shared among all project stakeholders. Two key goals of a strategic plan are reducing costs and adding value. Once the strategy for the project is complete and communicated to stakeholders, the planning process can begin. Good materials management results in efficiencies and cost savings. Typically, materials are not purchased all at once at the beginning of a project. So, analyzing ongoing inventory costs and purchasing data is an ongoing process. Here is a list of project strategy items relating to material that materials managers should consider. Take a moment to review the list, then click Next when you are ready to continue. Front-end planning involves identifying, quantifying, and scheduling the acquisition of project materials and equipment. Important decisions must be made in this phase of the materials management process. Managers decide on materials requirements based on the project's timeline, costs, and resources. These decisions will affect the whole project downstream and often will be difficult to retract. Determining what materials a project requires is key to its success, since planning their acquisition influences all its activities and has a significant impact on its schedule. This process involves various stakeholders, including owners, architects, engineers, contractors, fabricators, and suppliers. Materials management planning typically has 7 parts. Click each part to learn more. Engineering is a crucial element of the planning process. It uses its knowledge and technical expertise to identify materials requirements early in the process. This allows the materials manager to focus on the project's potential benefits and identify avoidable risks early. The implications of different materials are often not clear during the planning phase. This is where the engineer's knowledge and experience is needed to consider options and assess a given material's pros and cons. One way to test different options is to simulate the construction activities, test them, and validate their effects. In case of problems, using value engineering can help identify alternative options. An example would be a requirement for special lining for pump equipment. If the quality of the material or its usage application requirements are not defined up front, it creates a risk that the material will not be suitable. We discuss value engineering in more detail in our scope and change order management course. Materials costs in procurement can be reduced by coordinated purchasing planning, which typically consists of 4 steps. Identify the materials categories, prioritize the categories, run the sourcing process, and implement agreements. Click each step to learn more. When you are finished, click here to download a PDF. Identify and have the involved parties agree on the materials categories. It is useful to estimate the size of each of the identified categories. Evaluate and prioritize each category, looking for savings potential and opportunities for scale. For high priority categories, run the sourcing process. Evaluate the current situation. Specify purchasing volumes, current suppliers, current prices, terms and conditions, required standards, and legal requirements. Map potential suppliers. Identify possible national and international options. Analyze possible obstacles. Test the products. Evaluate and shortlist suppliers. Develop a purchasing strategy. Include positioning and estimation of potential savings. Negotiate and select suppliers. Evaluate and assess each supplier's proposal. Once the suppliers are selected, negotiate and calculate the expected savings. Implement agreements. Sign the agreement with the suppliers based on the agreed parameters, responsibilities, and expectations, and communicate the agreement to the interested parties. And measure, following up, and develop. Manage and control the execution of the agreements. Implement the arranged agreements and integrate them with the upstream and downstream value chain to eliminate activities that do not add value. One of the significant complications with materials management in construction is that there is rarely a single purchasing function. In most cases, materials are procured by many stakeholders, including owners, general contractors, and subcontractors. As a result, the process is repeated multiple times during the execution of the project. With so many entities overlapping orders and activities, a complex network of systems and interactions is created with the potential for chaos. In general, we can describe economies of scale as the reduction in unit costs as volume increases. For example, the unit price for concrete footings to cover a 20,000 square foot area probably would be less per unit than footings to cover a 2,000 square foot area. Cost savings are achieved through bulk purchasing, unit price negotiation for bulk purchase, logistics, and better use of resources during the project. To leverage economies of scale, all the entities involved in a project should agree on a coordinated procurement process. The earlier this is done, the more preparation time and flexibility it leaves for execution. Note that not all materials need to be handled this way. Some materials categories, for example, some low-value items or highly specialized items, are managed directly by the project entity responsible for them. When it comes to construction project management, there are two major factors to consider. Materials planning, which includes planning for quantities, budgeting, and estimating. And timeline planning, which includes assessing the impact of the critical path, lead times, and critical materials. Let's discuss these concepts further. Several methods can be used to estimate the quantities of materials needed. The preferred method should be selected in the project planning phase, and all parties should use the same approach throughout the project lifecycle. Here are some common materials estimation methods. Click each method to learn more. Centerline, crossing, out to out and in to in, service unit, and bay method. Click each method to learn more. In built environment projects, many expenses are non-negotiable. However, materials costs are a key area where savings can be realized. This is where relationships are established with suppliers, and costs can be negotiated based on the scale of the order. Depending on the situation, the following budgeting techniques can be used: incremental, zero-based, cash-limited, resource-restricted, activity-based, and contingency. Click each technique to learn more. When you are finished, click here to download a PDF. With every project, there should be clearly defined starting and ending points, with the project activities conducted in between. These points define the critical path. The purpose of the critical path is to identify all tasks and activities that are important for the successful completion of a project. The time needed to complete these activities adds up to the project's maximum total time. For example, we can't start building the walls of a building if the concrete footings are not ready. To complete the footings, we need to first pour the concrete and wait for it to harden. Before any of this can be done, the concrete needs to be ordered, prepared, and delivered on site. The construction cannot progress further until the footings are complete, and therefore all activities related to their completion will be on the critical path. This approach helps managers identify and control activities outside the critical path, which can be delayed or prioritized without changing the total project development time. Here is an example of a critical path diagram. Take a moment to review it, then click Next when you are ready to continue. Lead time is the amount of time between requesting work to happen and when the work is complete. It is one of the most important parts of materials management scheduling, defining when certain materials or equipment will be available for use in construction. There are 5 main types of lead time: mobilization activities, customer lead time, material lead time, production lead time, and cumulative lead time. Click each type to learn more. When you are finished, click here to download a PDF. Identify the materials and equipment that are critical to the success of the project in advance, during the planning and design stages. Their availability needs to be taken into consideration during the scheduling process to mitigate any risks and improve the flow of the project. The main issues affecting materials availability are limited availability in the region where the project will be located, likelihood of supply disruptions, changes in geopolitical stability, environmental issues, increased demand caused by changes in the scale of use of the project, and increased overall market demand. It's important to remember that non-critical materials and equipment may become critical at certain points throughout the project lifecycle. This can happen due to internal or external factors like project scope changes or logistical disruptions. Once the new material becomes critical, it needs to be included in the project plan and managed accordingly. For example, a U.S. lumber shortage caused prices to more than triple between 2020 and 2021, and to add thousands of dollars to the overall cost of new home construction. Lumber suddenly became a critical material in these projects. Here we will investigate the financial management of materials in built environment projects. Studies conducted by the Construction Industry Institute concluded that about 50 to 60% of a project's overall cost relates directly to materials and equipment management. Therefore, many materials management decisions will have a direct impact on a project's financial health. Materials finance management is responsible for analyzing and tracking the materials costs accurately, maintaining the materials information and systems data, projecting the materials costs, controlling the materials billing, preparing required financial statements, and managing cash flows. A common industry problem for many construction firms is managing cash flow and paying bills. This usually occurs due to cash management at the beginning of the second half of the project, when any payment advances have been exhausted during the first half of the project. As an example, these issues arise due to the accumulated cost of materials paid by the general contractor and lack of paid invoices received from the contracting authority. The graph shown provides an example of how some general contractors forecast scenarios for their cash flow needs and the actual cash flow gaps that emerge. Cash flow management refers to the process by which an organization maintains control over the inflow and outflow of funds. The proper management of transactions can significantly affect the financial situation of the company and improve the debt service. Typical cash flow challenges in construction projects include high payroll liability, paying bills too early, lack of budget retainage, i.e., the portion of payment of the contract deliberately withheld until the work is substantially complete, paying cash for assets, customers not paying on time, not invoicing customers on time, poor treasury management, and advance payment to suppliers. Here is a list of best practices for cash flow management. Take a minute to review it, then click Next when you are ready to continue. Materials management is a large and complex process with a number of potential risks. Analyzing and managing them is an important part of the planning process. The supply chain is one of the main areas of high risk in the materials management. Here are some best practices for supply chain risk management. Take a moment to review the list, then click Next when you are ready to continue. Let's take a moment to see what you've learned. Congratulations! You have now completed the Strategy and Planning section. In the next section, you will learn Operations and Management of Materials.